Okay, so I hope we're on Facebook also. And bring everybody up here. There. Okay, good to see everybody, whoever I can see. So let's continue with where we were. You remember the last time we had spoken about famous story of Rabbi
Sorry,
Yehushua.
Rabbi Gonot, it could be, it's not so loud. I don't know about anybody else. I mean, I've got my cell phone on full volume, but is there any way you could make yourself a bit louder?
I don't know. Let me see if I can.
Is everybody hearing much clearer? Maybe it's,
Hold on a second.
sorry.
One, two, three. Yeah, it is a little low. Not sure why. um,
Well, I'm listening with earphones and I hear fine. So I don't know.
How's that? Can you hear me better now? Can you hear
Okay,
me
so
better?
maybe that's the thing. Shoshana, I'll also get my earphones. Maybe that's the
Okay.
trick. Sorry, I'll try that as well.
Hold on. I thought I turned it up. It's not going higher. I don't know why.
All right.
Yocheved just said that that's better.
Yeah, it is better.
Oh, yeah, it's
Hi,
okay?
Yocheved.
Yeah, hi.
Okay. So hopefully it's okay. So let's recap the story. I'm going to share the screen with you so that you can see it. There we go. And then we're looking at this. Okay. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi met Eliyahu at the entrance to the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He said to Eliyahu, "When is the Mashiach coming?" Eliyahu replied, "Go and ask him." And where is he? Where's the Mashiach? He's at the gateway of Rome. And how will I recognize him? Asks Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And Eliyahu tells him he sits among the poor, suffering from affliction. And Rashi explains that this refers to leprosy. As it says, he is impure because of our sins, and he carries the burden of our affliction. These are two separate verses in Isaiah. They, the other lepers, remove all their bandages altogether, but he removes one and returns it. For he feels that he might be needed at any moment, therefore he should not take more than one bandage off at a time. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he comes there. It's not clear how he comes there. We said that one possibility is that this is all happening in spiritual worlds, in his mind. And he says to him, "Shalom upon you, my Rav and teacher." He replied, "Shalom upon you, Ben Levi." And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says to him, "When are you coming?" And he answered, the Mashiach answered, "Today." So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi returned to Eliyahu. Eliyahu asked him, "What did he tell you?" And it says he replied, what did he reply? He lied to me. He said, "Today." Whatever he said to me, he lied. Yet he did not come. Said Eliyahu to Rabbi Yeshua, what he said was, "Today, if you hearken to his voice, if you listen to his voice." Who's to his voice? So we explained last time that this is talking about listening to God's voice. When Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked the Mashiach himself, "When are you coming?" the Mashiach answered with complete confidence, "Today." But when the Mashiach did not come that same day, Eliyahu explained that he had meant today if you hearken to his voice. The Torah of our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, the teachings of Chassidus, are meant to disseminate the verity, the true meaning of this verse. What's the verse? What today was he talking about? So Eliyahu says today if you listen to his voice. But the Baal Shem Tov interprets this, and there's other interpretations as well, that the today also refers to another verse that starts with today, or has the word today in it. The loving kindness of God extends all day long. Chesed kel, the loving kindness of God, kol hayom, is all day long. From which comes the consciousness in the surface of chai chai, hem yoducha kayom, that those who are alive, who have a feeling of life, can give praise to Hashem today, right now. Chai chai hu yoducha kamoni hayom. Additionally, was the Baal Shem Tov revealed that the holy name related to kfitzat derech, to skipping, that the earth leaps, is learned from the initials of the verse uttered by Eliezer, I came to the well today. Va'avo hayom el ha'ayin. Okay, so this is what we have translated, and we have a lot to work with beyond what we said last time. So, what is really happening here? What is this? This whole story is very perplexing, because exactly what does it mean that somebody comes to think about where is the Mashiach, where is he sitting? So when we explain things psychologically, it's very simple. That the moral of the story, the point of the whole story is, where is the Mashiach power in our faculties? Where is the ability to be redeemed in our faculties? Where is it sitting? Where exactly is it? Is it faith, for instance? Is it something else? That's what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is really asking. What is coming to a state of redemption, of healing myself, of breaking out of my bad habits and so on? What is that dependent on? Where do I have to work on myself? Where do I have the faculties that can help me get out of the situations that I'm in right now? The first thing he does is he goes to Eliyahu. What does it mean he goes to Eliyahu? That he goes to look, we can say, we learned this many times, that all of the Pnimius of Torah, all of the Kabbalah until the Baal Shem Tov, is considered to be something that was taught by Eliyahu Hanavi to the various sages. So for instance, the Arizal, he describes that everything that he received from Eliyahu. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is like a Kabbalist, he's like a Mekubal. And what does he look for? He looks for Eliyahu to give him a hint to where he needs to look at himself, where he needs to go. Says Eliyahu, this question that you're asking me, it's better that you go straight to the source. If you want to bring the Mashiach, it's not about, call it, revealing some hidden secret. It's not some hidden secret that you need to find and understand. I'm going to turn people's causing, I don't know, some of these is causing a lot of noise. Just a second. Okay, I think we're done. So it's not about revealing some deep secret in the Torah per se. In a certain sense, revealing the secrets of the Torah is almost how to pass the time until you become ready to actually bring Mashiach. How is Mashiach himself brought? You have to go to Mashiach himself. That's what Eliyahu is telling Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Don't search for Mashiach in some deep hidden secrets. Why? Because Mashiach is about changing reality. It's about changing your reality. And so it has to be about reality. It has to be being connected to reality. It can't be learning some deep secret that somehow from afar will change reality. It has to be about engaging reality. I want to say something more about this, about stages in how Mashiach is revealed. We know that, or we've all heard, that there's apparently two types of Mashiach. There's Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. What is Mashiach ben Yosef? So it's because the Gemara brings this and the various Midrashim bring this, that this language has become very well known. Mashiach ben Yosef is building on the success of Yosef in Egypt. Joseph was the first person to be able to become a second in command, to become a viceroy, an aide to the king, who was so powerful that he was able to circumcise the Egyptians. He was able to bring them as close as possible to what we call monotheism, to belief in Hashem. Who is Mordechai's Gilgul? His main second appearance in the Bible, in the Tanakh. So that's obviously Mordechai. Mordechai, who was also from the offspring of Rachel. He's from this tribe of Benjamin. He's a brother of Joseph's. He's able to become the viceroy in Persia. In fact, in that case, we see that there's two people involved. There's Mordechai and Esther together. And it's not clear who made the biggest change. Was it Mordechai who became the closest person to Achashverosh, Mishneh LaMelech, who becomes the second in command? And because of everything that Mordechai did, especially the second group of epistles that he sent out that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves, he brought many of the nations, many of the non-Jews to decide to become Jews, to convert. Rabim me'amei ha'aretz mityadim. That many non-Jews, nations of the land, were converting to Judaism. So there's something about Mashiach ben Yosef, who is an example of a person who is very close to the ruling empire of the time. And he's so close, he's such a close advisor, that actually he can change the entire course of history, because that's the empire of that time. And he can prepare the world in a almost, call it, miraculous way, based on his tremendous knowledge of Torah, based on his tremendous piety. He prepares the world and transforms it into a world that is ready for the redemption. That's Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben David is a second stage according to the Rambam. It's not, doesn't have to necessarily be a different person. So Ruthie wants to ask something. So go ahead, Ruthie.
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, you raised your hand up. Okay.
Oh, that was before. I don't know how to use the Zoom. I can't believe I got you. I'm so excited.
Okay.
No, I don't need anything. Keep going.
Okay. So according to the Rambam, Mashiach ben David is actually a second stage in the development of the same individual. The first stage is when he's an advisor. He, like Yosef, like Mordechai before him, those are the role models, those are the personas that depict this type of preparation for redemption, of a very pious man who works through the empire of the time in order to bring the world to a state in which it's ready to be redeemed. By the way, I don't think we talked about this last time. I may have said a few words about it. It almost is clear that the Lubavitcher Rebbe felt when he talked about Mashiach coming immediately, that this is the generation of Mashiach. There's a very good reason to believe that he was expecting to become, or he already was in some capacity, an advisor to the presidents of the United States, which is the empire of our time. It's the greatest empire in our time. And the picture there is, in Mashiach ben Yosef, is a very pious individual who advises, who becomes an advisor to the empire that can really create change in the world, that can really prepare the world for a better reality. And many times the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say about America that it's a kingdom, it's an empire of kindness. That the whole point of the redemption is to bring kindness and goodwill into the world. And that's what the United States is trying to do. That is the real intent of our present day empire. In any case, whether this happened or didn't happen, it seems that it didn't happen, it didn't finish. And even the first stage of becoming an advisor to the presidents didn't fully happen. Maybe it happened in some level that we're not aware of, but certainly it wasn't something open as it was by Mordechai and as it was by Yosef. By the way, by Yosef and by Mordechai, it's pretty clear that they had to hide to some extent their being Jewish. That even though they themselves were very pious, they couldn't exhibit behavior that was Jewishly pious. The same thing also occurred by Daniel, who is the only person about whom the Tanakh describes that that the Talmud describes that he's Mashiach. And it says that if Mashiach is somebody is soul from those who have already lived in the world, then that's Daniel. And Daniel, if you read his book, you'll see that he's also a tremendous advisor to the king of Babylon, but he has to hide the fact that he's Jewish. Meaning they knew he was Jewish, but he didn't bring it out externally. He didn't show it externally. And even when he went to pray, he used to pray only at home, like now. And he could never join Jews in praying openly because it wouldn't be accepted in the Babylonian palace. In a certain sense, Mordechai and Yosef also had to hide externally their being Jewish. In any case, we have a very holy individual who is preparing the world through acts that have to do with the empire that he's advising. So that's the one model that's called Mashiach ben Yosef. And from this comes a very interesting model that all the individuals, all the great rabbinic leaders who were in touch with the king or the duke, or whoever it was, wherever they lived, or the sultan, they are considered to be embodiments of Mashiach ben Yosef. So for instance, the Rambam, who was very close to the sultan in Cairo, he even got him to agree in principle to setting up a Jewish autonomy in the land of Israel during his time. That plan, I'm not sure exactly what happened to it, but the Rambam writes about it. It's known that he was actually able to convince the Sultan to do this. There were many other pious leaders that were connected to the empires or the people in power in their times, and they were able to save the Jews from different things. And even brings some measure of Yiddishkeit, some measure of true belief in Hashem to the non-Jews. These are all called Mashiach ben Yosef. So Mashiach ben Yosef, in a certain sense, he's not practical in the sense that he's not the one who goes and does things. Rather, he's more like an advisor. He's more like somebody who gives advice. So if we remember, the Netzach and Hod, victory and acknowledgement, that have been our staple throughout talking about confidence, active confidence and passive confidence. Netzach and Hod, as we talked, as we explained a few times, they really are divided into three parts. What are the three parts? We said the kidneys, and then the sexual organs, the inner part of the sexual organs, and finally, it's the legs. The left and right leg are really the most external part of active and passive confidence. What do the kidneys do? We said that the kidneys give counsel. They're the counselors. They're the ones who think up the advice. And in this sense, Mashiach ben Yosef is someone who develops his ability to give advice, but again, it's practical advice, but it's not through his feet. He's not going to do the legwork. He's only going to think it through and give advice so that in the end, the empire of the time, or whoever has the influence at the time, is able to change reality and prepare it for a better situation. So when it comes to us, when we talk about Mashiach ben Yosef, it's like we're talking about the kidneys that are giving counsel about what needs to be done. But that is not yet the full Mashiach. The full Mashiach is when it comes out into active and passive confidence as it's connected to reality, as it's connected to the actual legwork that needs to be done. There's a lot of legwork that we actually need to do. That is already Mashiach ben David. That's already the second stage, according to the Rambam, of the Mashiach's development, where he transfers from just being, call it again, this advisor, or a man with great plans, into somebody who actually executes the plans and actually puts his feet on the ground, connects to reality, and begins to change reality directly without any counsel in between. How is this in our story? That you see that the Mashiach is sitting where? He's sitting at the gateway of Rome. He's sitting at the entrance to Rome. Why is he sitting there? What? He had no other place to be but in Rome. The understanding is that he's closer right now, he's closer to being an advisor. He wants to be near the seat of power, and he's expecting to be called at any moment. So who is he expected to be called by? Two explanations. One is that he's expecting to be called at any moment to redeem the Jewish people by the Romans, by the people who have power. And they come and say, we want a better world. We want to change the world. We want to change it for the better. We need you to give us the counsel. We need you to help us understand what needs to be done. In that sense, he's sitting at the great gates of Rome, waiting to be called upon to advise. He's like Mashiach ben Yosef. But he's also waiting for us to call him. Meaning not just to advise the nations, the empire at that time, the people who have the power about what they need to do. He's also waiting for us to need him. To need him in the sense of we want to actually change things in reality. not just to cause a change in the empire, in the way that they see things. We want to actually change things in reality. The interesting thing is that when we look at, for instance, Mordechai, or we look at Yosef to a certain extent, but Mordechai is the explicit example. After he was already the advisor, he set up the situation in which it would be possible to build the temple. He set up the situation in which the Jewish people could be autonomous again and could rebuild the presence of Hashem in the world. And yet, what do we see happen? That when the time came, it was after his life. It was conducted mostly by Ezra and Nehemiah. And when the time came, actually it wasn't after his life, if I'm not mistaken, he merited going back to the land of Israel with Nehemiah. And when the time came, in spite of the fact that he had set everything up through his advice, through his counsel, the Jewish people weren't ready for it. They weren't ready to put their feet on the ground and actually use all the changes that he had created, all the changes in the outlook in the Persian Empire that would allow them to connect to this idea of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, being priests to Hashem, as being the people that should advise the world about what it means to lead a good and righteous life. The Jewish people themselves were not ready to make that transformation. They weren't ready to change their outlook and say, we already have somebody in the highest ranks, and he set everything up, but they weren't ready to call him, to call Mordechai, to call his advice into play, and to create the second temple period. They weren't ready for it. Something needed to change in them. And in that sense, that's what Rav Yoshua ben Levi going back to Eliyahu is. It's a declaration that in fact, I'm not ready. And Mashiach says to him today, I'm coming today. And Rav Yoshua ben Levi, he goes back to Eliyahu and says, he lied to me, he didn't come today. We have to understand this better. What does this mean? That Rav Yoshua ben Levi is saying to us, look, I too have this issue about transforming my plans and my advice and my counsel into something on the ground. I too have this issue. Where does he run back to? He runs back to Eliyahu, to more counsel. Instead of, what should he have done? Something like, take the Mashiach by hand and tell him, you've done all you can in Rome already. Now it's time to set up the Jewish kingdom. Now it's time to come to Eretz Yisrael. It's time to change reality here, or however you see it. Okay? But that shift didn't happen. Instead, Rav Yoshua ben Levi, after he sees the Mashiach, and the Mashiach tells him, I'm coming today. It all depends on who? On you. If you listen to his voice, who's his voice? Again, this is Eliyahu's interpretation, that he's talking about listening to his voice. Eliyahu himself is telling Rav Yoshua ben Levi, Mashiach is waiting for you to be willing to take his advice, to be willing to set up the new kingdom, be willing to set up this new reality. So there's something in you that's preventing it. You're not yet thinking properly. You're not yet thinking about this correctly. Okay. To understand what the mistake was, we have to go a little bit deeper into Rav Yoshua ben Levi's thought. Rav Yoshua ben Levi thinks that the moment that he sees Mashiach, he's going to ask him, when is he coming? And if he says today, so he should come today. It's that simple. What he doesn't realize is that Mashiach does not act alone. Mashiach is not some kind of miracle that happens in the world and it acts and by hocus pocus, he walks around the world and he changes it. That's not Mashiach. That's not Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben David is dependent on collecting all the exiles, meaning having everybody with him. He can't become Mashiach ben David until until everybody, every last Jew is with him. He has to be with him at some level. Why? Because, again, it's not hocus pocus. He's done all that he can by advising the powers, the empires of the time. Now it's up to us to call him to lead us. That's a different level altogether. That's what it means to be connected to Mashiach ben David, much more than Mashiach ben Yosef. So again, by Mashiach ben Yosef, it's like an inner process that's not necessarily feet on the ground. It's more like the kidneys, it's counsel. And Mashiach ben David is taking that counsel and calling it out into reality and letting it now act in reality. There's the message, and then there's acting upon the message. The message is what Mashiach ben Yosef gives, or that part of Mashiach that is more about the counsel. The action comes from further below. It's a call to action based on that message, whatever that message was. And this was the part that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi wasn't clear upon. He didn't understand this. In fact, it's very clear that he doesn't understand it because the moment Mashiach says to him today, what is he thinking? Today means today. I've found the Mashiach, hip for me. And now it's up to the Mashiach to take care of everything. It's not up to me. It has nothing to do with me. It has now to do with who? With him. If he wants to, it's up to him now. So it's very annoying to him that he found the Mashiach, he found this power, this counsel, and he's waiting for it now to change the world, and nothing happens. It just doesn't happen. So he hears this word. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a moment. So he hears the word today, and he interprets it to mean that Mashiach will do everything by himself today. That's what it means. That's the idea. But what's the truth? The truth that he doesn't recognize, he goes back to Eliyahu, and Eliyahu tells him his own thoughts. And he says to him, today, if you listen to his words. What do you mean, if you listen to his words? If means that it's conditional. It's not like you thought. You thought at the moment that you find this power in you that understands what the redemption is, let's say it a little bit differently, that meeting the Mashiach in Rome is like the faith. It's like picturing what I would like to happen. So you thought that it's enough for you just to picture it. It's enough for you to just find it. Find your vision. What would you like that should happen? That's what you thought. I'm telling you that it's conditional. What do I mean by conditional? If you listen to his voice, that if that's your point of view, then now you have to construct a whole, call it, structure of action, different things that need to happen, everybody needs to be with them, and so on and so forth. This takes forever. really that was how the Baal Shem Tov first responded also. When he met the Mashiach, and the Mashiach told him, now when am I coming? And he said to him, when your well springs spread outwards. What happened to the Baal Shem Tov because of that? He says his spirit fell because they said, how that's going to take forever. Why? Because again, he's thinking about how do you set up the entire structure for this to happen. Instead, what should he be thinking? What is the other option? So that's what the Baal Shem Tov adds to this. And he says, the Hayom is the interpretation as if you listen to him today, if you hearken his voice today, that's Eliyahu's interpretation. But we said Eliyahu, he's the lower level of revelation. He's only Kabbalah. But in Chassidus, it's Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. That Hayom becomes that Hashem is full of loving kindness all day long. The plan is that you don't need to plan. What you need to do is engage in loving kindness. That's what you need to do. That's the whole shita of the Baal Shem Tov. That the more loving kindness you engage in, the more you do things that are chassidus in their essence, meaning that they have to do with spreading loving kindness, that is the plan. It's not nothing else needed. You need to actually go out there and do things. And not just plan them, not just start building a whole construct. A couple of days ago, somebody sent me this 20-page, 22-page plan for how to bring Mashiach. That's not bad. That's what the Rebbe said. You should all constantly be planning on how to bring Mashiach. But the planning, if it stands by itself and you're going to spend like a year or 2 years or whatever you need, because you look at Mashiach, it's like the biggest project ever done. So if you look at things that way, you'll never get to them. You'll never actually get to where the metal meets the road, where the rubber meets the road. You have to actually cling to reality. It doesn't matter how great your plan is. If you're not doing practical things to make it happen, that's not Mashiach. That's not enough to create redemption. There have to be practical actions that are taken right away in order for Mashiach to come. Because it involves a change in your outlook on things. What's the change? So I want to make this perfectly clear. That in the sense of Mashiach ben Yosef, is everything is done by planning. How is Yosef described in the Torah? When Paro decides to take Yosef as his advisor, what great quality did he see? He saw that he knew how to plan. He knew how to plan for the 7 years of famine that would follow the 7 years of plenty. He was a planner. He was somebody who had in his mind, and it's very important that to advise properly, you have to have a whole plan set in place. But that's Mashiach ben Yosef. That's the counsel. But when it comes to actually bring Mashiach ben David, there has to be actual actions that are taken and not just planning. It's not enough to just plan. Planning is fine, but you have to actually start doing something. Okay? So that's a very big difference between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. A tremendous difference between the two. The Mashiach ben Yosef is, I hope it's okay that Golan joined us. If anyone wants to turn their video off, that's fine. You can also watch it on Facebook. Well, Golan turned his off, so that's fine. So the idea here is that you can't just make plans. And we tend, when we talk about the difference between faith and confidence, to mix those two up. We've talked a lot about how important it is to actually plan, to have a vision of what you want. But Mashiach himself, as understood by the Baal Shem Tov, is not if you follow his voice, meaning if you listen to what he tells you to do, if you listen to his plan. Rather, it's about you actually going out and doing things. Chesed kel kol hayom. That Hashem's loving kindness, it fills the entire day. And the more that you feel that loving kindness and as it permeates out from you, that's what causes the Mashiach to appear in reality. One of the best examples of this is what we call a Nefesh HaShpila, which was a piece of paper that was found in the Alter Rebbe's coat after he passed away. And in it, he gave call it the summary of his whole career, of his whole life, thinking about the needs of the Jewish people, thinking about redemption, thinking about everything. And what was his final, call it in a certain sense, his last testament, last will? What does he want? He wants people to go do loving kindness to others, even if they're not worthy of it, even if they don't deserve it. So this plan, says Golan, is like a checklist. I've got this checklist in my mind, but if I don't actually go and use it, so it gets stuck. And the truth is that the moment that you actually go do things, you find that reality has already been prepared for what you need. It's already prepared. The work has already been done. To say it in context of Koach Nisan, the 20th day of Nisan. So Rav Yitzchak explained that was like the transfer between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. That, like the Rebbe said, I've done all I can as Mashiach ben Yosef in preparing as much as I could the entire world, meeting with everybody I could, influencing whoever I could, Jews and non-Jews alike, and with all these dealings with the United States government. And there's many, many stories that haven't come out. One of the famous ones I think we mentioned was the first African-American woman who was made into the Secretary of Agriculture. And she thought it was a slap in the face. And she sent either a letter or she sent somebody to the Rebbe. This was talking about in the 1960s, early 1960s. I don't remember her name. She sent a letter to the Rebbe, or the Rebbe even sent her a letter. I think he read about the fact that she felt that this was a slap in the. It was not what she was waiting for as the first African American woman to have a secretary position in the United States government. And the Rebbe gave her the idea of food stamps. That was the amazing thing. He said, since you're responsible for all the agriculture, all the produce in the United States, and the United States has one big problem, which is that there is no or almost no safety net for people. That, as we used to say when I was growing up, in America you can die in the street and nobody will come help you because you don't have, medical insurance or whatever it is. That feeling that we're all fighting against each other for these limited resources is very strong in America. And there's a lot of compassion that's missing. So compassion is done a lot on the private basis, but the government is not involved in it. And the Rebbe's idea to bring food stamps into the whole story was an incredible influence in bringing more loving kindness into the government itself. And the truth has to be said that those things really affected the way that government sees itself in America. Even the most Republican government today feels that it's the government's duty to help people get, for instance, a vaccine to corona. They don't think that people have to be given the bill to pay for it. They really feel that it should be something that the government gives for free to everybody to ensure that they have a good life. And there's many other things that have developed because of that. But in any case, certainly everything that the United States, again, I don't know how much to attribute to the Rebbe and how much to attribute to powers that were in play anyway, but to bring it under the idea that the United States has the power to influence the world to be a better place, to hold the world accountable for human rights, for democracy, for all these things that are required to have a good world. That was an incredible shift that happened in American thinking in the 50 years that the Rebbe was in the United States. And it wasn't something that was very dominant before then. In fact, the United States was, in fact, you could say that the United States became a real superpower because of that change. In any case, that was the Rebbe influencing, that's Mashiach ben Yosef influencing the powers that be to make the world a better place. But at some point he comes and says, it's not enough that the non-Jewish world is accepted, or that the powers have accepted my counsel. They've accepted what needs to change. They've made a checklist, as the Golan said. You also have to call me. You, the Jewish people, also have to call me. And from Koach Nisan and on, from the 20th day of Nisan in 57, 51, when the Rebbe made this call, he was expecting, I think that's what he said, that it's now up to you. It's up to you to want to call upon this power of redemption that's now in the world. It's up to you to now utilize it, to put it into practice, to bring it down to your 2 feet. Okay, we'll see a lot more about this in chapter 8. We'll leave it at this for now, that there's a stage of planning, and it's very important. And the stage of planning is like Yosef, it's this ability to know secrets, to reveal things, to understand things. But even more than that is the external part of victory and acknowledgement, of Netzach and Hod, where you actually have to start acting. And the actions are first and foremost loving kindness. That's the first thing. That's called we say this every day in davening, 3 times a day, Chasdei David HaNe'emanim, the loving kindness of David. Why David here? Because in this case, David is likened to victory and acknowledgement. It's a whole sugya in Kabbalah that I don't want to get into right now, but really what it means is that all of the loving kindness in my heart is brought out, it's manifest in the world through my victory and acknowledgement, through my confidence that I can actually do this, that I can actually help somebody, that I can actually change things, and that Hashem is looking at that all day long. Chesed kel kol hayom, that's what he wants to do all day long. In this sense, you have to skip over Eliyahu. That's the big chiddush here. The fact that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi kept going back to Eliyahu was the source of the problem. Meaning that you also sometimes have to skip. Now, skipping is a big deal. We're usually very against skipping things. For instance, the biggest example of skipping things that is detrimental is in this process of submission, separation, and sweetening. And we've talked about it many times that people tend out of their motivation to change the world, they tend to skip over the middle stage, sorry, which is called separation. Separation means becoming holy, becoming pious. Separation is the stage that's most connected to Eliyahu, because Eliyahu gives a person da'at. And separation is always about da'at. In fact, that's how it's defined, that when a person sees Eliyahu, it's like he has a sudden success in consciousness. Suddenly I come to a new realization that I didn't have before. He teaches me consciousness, he teaches me knowledge. That's what revealing Eliyahu means. So there's a tendency to skip over that, because separation also means to be separate, to be different, to be outstanding, to be special. And there's a feeling that people have that if I stand out, if I'm not one of the guys, if I'm not, let's call it colloquial, if I'm not Farmer Joe, then I'm unapproachable. There was a president a few years ago, his name was Obama, that he came off and he used this to the like Clinton, to the highest possible degree of being your best buddy. He's very intelligent, he's very smart, but he's really, really approachable. He's absolutely not aloof. He would never condescend to somebody. He would never patronize somebody. He would always come off as being somebody that you would enjoy inviting over to your house. Now, is this good or is it bad? So it depends. If what you need is somebody for a cocktail party, that is probably the best choice that you have. But if what you're looking is to create real change, like Joseph, who was different from all the Egyptians and therefore wasn't locked into their way of thinking, you have to be separate. You have to stand above it. And separation, as we always explain, is the stage of being distant, of connecting with the divine soul, of being disconnected from reality. So it's usually, so for instance, let's take the state of Israel. The notion that you can just create a state that will be like all the other states is skipping over the true separation that would allow the state of Israel to become the handiwork of Hashem, the handiwork of redemption, would become the instrument of redemption. For it to really function that way, there has to be a stage, and not just a stage, but a constant feeling that I am at a higher standard. I am holding a different flag. I am representing something higher, something more moral. But if you come and say, my only purpose is survival, I just don't want to be Auschwitz again. All I want to do, because that's all I need in the world, then you may gain that. God willing, you'll continue to have that. But that prevents what you've created from becoming an instrument for something higher, for becoming an instrument of redemption, real change. To say it another way, and since we don't have much time left, I really want to impress this on us, that when we're talking about faith and confidence, the faith has to constantly accompany the confidence in doing. Meaning there has to always be a state of reminding myself that even though I go to the same office space as somebody else, what I'm using is a higher standard. Or, for instance, when it comes to, let's talk about medicine for a second, that even though the doctor needs a lot of confidence that he can heal something, he also has to constantly have a feeling that whatever he's doing is coming from a higher source. And he's only providing the instrument. He's only putting the rubber to the road. But really what's coming into this is the effect, the affect with an A, of Hashem blessing the handiwork that he's engaged in. So for instance, when you take medicine, what does the person have to feel? He has to feel, there's a very famous verse, that Uvarech Hashem lachmecha umemecha, that Hashem is blessing your food, your bread and your water. Rav Nachman has a whole Torah on this, where he explains that if you take the medicine and you don't believe that Hashem is blessing it, that he's putting himself into this in order to heal you, because that's what the initials of this month are. Ani Hashem Rofecha. I am Hashem who heals you. Even though the doctor is the one who has the faith, has the confidence, who has to actually do the action. But it's me, Hashem, who is healing you. So if that doesn't enter into the act, then the act is devoid of anything. It's like taking, you might as well not take it, almost. Of course, it has some physical benefits. You must have some physical benefits, but it's almost like if you're taking, let's say, a Tylenol, you should expect not just your headache to go away, but you should also expect yourself to be taller and stronger after you've taken it. Okay? At least spiritually, if not actually physically. There has to be an understanding that what I'm doing is just the final stage in a 3-stage process. So that's the normal way that we explain this. That you cannot skip over the middle stage of separation. You can't skip over Eliyahu. So in a sense, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was doing exactly what we just said. He asks Eliyahu, where's Mashiach? He goes to see Mashiach. Mashiach tells him today. He comes back to Eliyahu and he says, you told me today, but it's not happening. Why is he going back to Eliyahu? Why doesn't he just accept that Mashiach said today, so it's today? So Eliyahu says then, because you're still thinking in terms of planning. You're still thinking of how this is all going to play out. Whereas he said to you, today, didn't mean Hayom im bekolot tishmau. Not if you listen to him today. Rather, it should be like the Baal Shem Tov explained, Hayom is really chesed kel kol hayom. If today he's coming, imagine that today Mashiach is coming. Would you act the same way that you're acting now? Why isn't he coming? Because we're not calling him. That's the simple understanding. Because we're not calling him, because we don't believe that he can come today. If I believe that he was coming today, would there be limits on the loving kindness I would do? Or would I just dedicate myself to that, and that would be the end of it? Because I don't have to plan for 50 more days. Everything will be fine anyway. In the psyche, this means that when you do the act, it has to be with a complete conviction that this is it. This is what's needed. This is the makeh b'patish. This is the final stage in what needs to be done. I don't have to mitigate myself. I don't have to temper myself. I don't have to second guess myself. I can flow with it. I can go with it. And so if my upbringing has been that in order to bring Mashiach, like the Baal Shem Tov said, and the Alter Rebbe said, it's to do loving kindness. So that's what I need to focus on. I don't need to worry about how this is all going to work out later on. It has to be an understanding that I'm calling Mashiach into my actions, into the very things that I'm doing. Chesed kel kol hayom, all day long. Again, when we talk about Mashiach, the story here is about Mashiach. I want to transfer it into the psychology. If we're talking about Mashiach, it's not just me or any of the people here listening. It's not just one or two people. When we're talking about Mashiach, it's about a conviction that relates to the entire Jewish people. We said that Mekabetz Nidchei Israel, the Mashiach is able to bring together all the vagabond Jews, all the exiled Jews in the sense of not connected, is because he needs everybody. So that's what Mashiach. But when I'm talking about my own mission in life, the actions have to be done in such a way that I feel that every action has the full force of my conviction. I don't do things halfway. So if it's about becoming well, if it's about improving myself in some way, whatever I'm doing has the full conviction. I don't go back to the planning board, the drawing board every few minutes and rethink what I'm doing. No, what I do is whatever I've decided is the course of action, I begin to do it with a full conviction that this is what needs to be done. I'm calling upon what I've drawn in my mind's eye and saying this is what needs to happen. I didn't skip the stage of Eliyahu because I asked Eliyahu in the beginning, where is he? And he said to me, he's in Rome. Why is he in Rome? Because he wants to give counsel. Okay, so I go to him and I think about what the counsel is. But once I reach the stage of asking him, when are you coming? When is this actually going to happen? The change has to be complete, transfer of all the energy into the action. And not second guessing myself, always going back. There's a beautiful example of this. That the Baal Shem Tov, it's a Kabbalah from the Baal Shem Tov, that if you're planning to leave home to do something, and you're already in the car or on the bus or wherever you are, and you remember that you forgot something, not to go back. Why? Why shouldn't you go back? If it's something very important for you, why not go back? No, because if you've already put yourself into motion, if you've already started acting, the full sense of conviction that what I wanted to do is with me is enough. You never know yourself how things are going to turn out anyway. What's important for you is the sense that you're all there. Whatever is with you is enough. You don't need more than that. When a person has that feeling that whatever I planned on going, again, it's removing all my doubts. Let's say if I forgot something at home, it's like now I feel that I'm in doubt whether I'll succeed in doing what I was supposed to do. No, you already made the plan and you went out. That's what Hashem is asking you for. The moment you begin to introduce these doubts into what you're doing, you're calling into doubt your ability to actually act. You're counting on your plan as if that's what actually gives the power to succeed. And that's not what gives the power to succeed. You need the plan in order to connect to Hashem, to see that there's a higher counsel. But the power to succeed is given by Hashem directly to you when you actually go and act. A beautiful example of this, again, is what I just said from the Baal Shem Tov. Another one is that when you take some kind of medicine, for instance, before you take it, you have to clean your mind of any doubt that this won't work. Because, maybe you're taking medicine that in the factory came out wrong. It has all the filler, but none of the active ingredients. Who knows? You never know. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you take it with the understanding, with the knowledge, with the consciousness that this is what I've been told will help me. And I have to remove every single doubt that I have that this won't work, because it's not the cheshbonos, it's not the different thinking of the doctor who invented this that's really going to heal me. That was needed because it's a necessary stage. But in practice, it's my confidence that I can change, that I can transform, I can heal, I can whatever it is, because Hashem is giving me the power to do that. He's the one who's giving you the strength to do what you need. Otherwise, you're counting on your thought. You're counting on your plan. You're counting on your ability to think, on how smart you are, on how conniving you are, maybe, how well thought out you are. And that's not what gives the power to succeed. Real confidence comes from having that as a stage. But once you finish that stage, like it says here to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, if you come and you make it conditional, it depends on this, depends on that. It doesn't depend. It only depends on one thing, Hashem. So once you've come to the place where you're acting, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you brought all your tools. You won't need them. If you already made the plan at home and you forgot your tools, I don't know if anybody remembers this. In the first year that we were in Torah Nefesh at Hebrew U, there was one time I think I came without, I don't remember what I came without. and I said to you that I went back home to get it. And if you remember, then I also laughed at myself and said if I really would believe what the Baal Shem Tov said, then I would have known that I didn't need this today. Whatever it was something very correct. I think it was the computer or whatever, and I was supposed to put something on the screen. Then don't need it. It's not needed at all. It's only if I made the plan to begin with. That's a necessary stage that Hashem wants. And whatever needs to be carried over from that stage will be carried over, regardless of whether I remembered it or not. It's all going to be there. And it could be that, okay, so what's another example of this? Mamish, exactly the same example, and we'll end with this. There's a famous story about the Arizal, who, it's almost like the story is almost like the Arizal exploring the limits of his own Torah. It's a famous story. It says that one Friday afternoon, the Arizal came to his students. They were learning together before Shabbos, and he said to them, I want you all to join hands, and we'll all be transported to Yerushalayim, to the Beis Hamikdash. It now is an Eit Ratzon. It's an auspicious time, and we can all bring the Geula right now. And so a couple of the students, or all of them, they said, they're very good Jewish husbands. They said, we have to go ask our wives if it's okay for us not to be here on Shabbos. Or maybe what they meant to say was, we have to go tell our wives and children to come. I forgot something at home. I forgot my entire home. It's not here. And the Arizal said that they had missed the golden opportunity because they didn't trust in him. Not to use this word. Because he didn't trust in me. He missed the opportunity. So exactly what the Arizal thought would happen, wouldn't happen, is not relevant to the story. It just means the same thing. That going to ask, having a condition, if my wife agrees, if my children can come, all these things, that's not relevant to the actual actions that have to do with redemption. And again, it could be redemption at the personal level and redemption on the cosmic level. Those questions are related to a previous stage. You already asked them. Obviously, if you live in a Jewish home, so and your wife hears that you didn't go on something like this, would she be happy or not happy? If you would tell her, look, the Rizal said the Mashiach could come now, but I had to go ask if it was okay for me to go play with somebody. So what would she say? She says, really? Is that what our relationship is about? In the end, my comfort? She'd be upset. I hope they never told their wives about this whole story. I know my wife would be upset. She would tell me, what are you talking about? Of course, most of the time I need you. But for something like this, what, am I not devoted to something so great? What do you think? You're the only one who's devoted? Of course I'm devoted to this. So the conditions don't apply. We'll say it a little bit more. The word for condition in Hebrew is im. What's the pasuk that Eliyahu told him? Hayom, today, im bekolot ishma. If you listen to his words. Im is also ima. It's also em. It's mother principle. It's thought. It's bina. And all conditions are in this overworked process of thinking and trying to second guess what exactly is needed. Once you made the plan, once you have the idea in mind, and you actually go out to do it, you have to go out with the conviction that Hashem is now going to bless the work of your hands. Otherwise, you're showing that you have not confidence in God, but confidence in your own abilities. You have to. That's the beginning of what we learn from this story. That when it comes to action, the confidence to bringing out all that I've planned, it has to be clean of all doubt, of all second guessing, of all feeling of maybe impropriety, that I'm not the right one to do it, and I'm not the improper, not impropriety. I'm not the proper person for this, and so inadequacy. It's not, no, I'm not inadequate. If this is what I need to do, if this is what I've been given, this is my mission, then the only thing I need to do is concentrate now on doing it. And I have to leave Eliyahu out of this story. Eliyahu is not part of this. Eliyahu, all these high thoughts, all these secrets of the Torah, they're not relevant now. Because now I have to go and actually do it. Again, it's not that I skipped over it initially. Initially, I did think. I am thinking in terms of how do I bring divinity down into the world. I am thinking about what is my divine mission in life. But when I actually go out and do, the doing has to be free of all these machinations, all these thoughts. Okay, so if there's any questions, you can. I think you can turn your own. I think you can turn your own. Well, I turned everybody on, huh? So if anybody wants to speak and ask something or say something, now's the time. So all the microphones are open for whoever wants to, unless you close your microphone, and then you have to open it.
I have a question, Rav Ganu.
Yes.
When you were talking about how where people tend to skip over is the separation, that whole thing of not wanting to be whatever outstanding. Like, is that ego? Like, what is that? That, I mean, I understand what it is, but do you call that ego? Is that the ego?
Sometimes it's ego because, for instance, in the case of the state of Israel, I think it's definitely ego because
Definitely what?
Definitely a state of ego because it's this feeling that we'll take care of ourselves. We don't need this Torah and a higher thought or higher principle to guide us in creating a safe haven for Jews. In those cases, it could really be evil. Many times it's just not knowing that this is a necessary stage.
Right.
It doesn't come from ego. It just comes from just that this wasn't made so, it wasn't so known before the Baal Shem Tov, that the stage was so necessary.
Right.
But when you look at, for instance, the parting of the Red Sea, you see that between subjecting Egypt to the plague and becoming free people and receiving the Torah, there is for some reason this whole story with the splitting of the sea and the separation, it's where the real separation happened between the Jews and the Egyptians. And that was a necessary part of the story. We always bring this, that Achnav Dalam Takah, submission, separation, sweetening. The only time in the Torah that it says sweetening is by the bitter waters of Marah, and that they were sweetened by Moshe. And the splitting of the waters, the separation of the waters, occurred in the Red Sea. And so in a certain sense, you could say, what was the Red Sea needed for? Why can't they just leave Egypt and go straight to Har Sinai and receive the Torah? He says, no, even when you're doing something that is certainly your mission and your calling and so on, there still has to be a state of building a separation from the material world, of ascribing to a higher ideal, of connecting to a higher plane of existence. And then once you've connected that way, then you can sweeten reality. Then you can begin. So a lot of times it's just people feeling, I really want to change reality, and then jumping straight ahead and not taking the time to think, well, is this my mission? What does it mean that it's my mission? What does the Torah have to say about something like this, and so on and so forth? There's an interesting story that there was a group of rabbis from Eretz Yisrael that came to the Rebbe, and they said that because the whole issue of who's a Jew didn't pass in the government, and a Jew is not defined as somebody who had a halachic conversion, so it's time to have special books in which we'll keep track of who's Jewish and who's not the government. And the Rebbe initially said to them, he gave them his blessing. And a day later, he called them back. And he said that he looked into it again, and absolutely not. You can't do this. That's one example of the separation happening afterwards. That on the one hand, he didn't want to take away their enthusiasm. On the other hand, he brought them back to tell them that still this is not a good idea. The same thing, if you read the famous thing, it's on the internet, you can look for it. When, what's his name, Rabbi from Efrat, Shlomo Riskin, was appointed to the rabbi of Lincoln Square Synagogue. His Rebbe, if you know, he says, yeah, I had two Rebbes. I had the Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was my halachic Rebbe, and I had the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was my spiritual Rebbe. And the big questions I came to the Rebbe with, that's what he says. Questions about how to lead, I came to the Rebbe with. And his question was that he had received a request from the women. The Lincoln Square Synagogue, when he was appointed, I guess it was 1963, 4, something like that, was tiny. There was no real Orthodox Jewish presence in Midtown. And he went to the Rebbe, and he said, I've been the women that do come requested that we give them a Sefer Torah to dance with, on Simchas Torah. And I know that if this is done, there will be a huge crowd. So the Rebbe said to him, "You can do it." And he says, there's no question in his mind. He writes out the words, what the Rebbe said. And he talked to him for 10 minutes about the importance of doing this. That very evening, he says, it was the evening of Simchas Torah. He came to the Rebbe sometime in the morning. Before the Chag began, the Rebbe sent somebody to him and said, "Call me now. I need to talk to you now." And he said, "What I told you before, I looked at it again in Shulchan Aruch, and it's completely forbidden, and you can't do it." He didn't say exactly completely forbidden. He gave the whole reason about something that the Alter Rebbe writes, that if in his time he was afraid of this, how much more so in our times that we should be afraid of something similar. You look for it on the internet. You'll find, look for Rabbi Riskin, Lubavitcher Rebbe, Simchas Torah, women dancing with Torah, whatever. You'll find the whole story. It's an incredible story. And again, it's a story where he didn't, on the one hand, he didn't want to, it seems that way, he didn't want to curb his enthusiasm. And he wanted him to feel, I think, that he's just as much there for the women as he is for the men. And there's no difference between the two. But afterwards, he found a way to do the Havdalah later. And to tell him, but in practice, you can't do this. This particular thing you can't do. But you're there for everybody. You're not there just for the men. And so you have to...
After, yes, Moshe hasn't finished. After Moshe finishes, Effie is on.
So look that story up. So those are examples of somebody not coming from ego at all, just from either not knowing. Again, in this case, it was a halachic consideration that I think the Rebbe knew beforehand. It wasn't like he didn't bring some obscure statement in Shulchan Aruch. He brought something that's well known, or at least for him, was well known. It looks more like that he had a process of how to take the person through the separation also, so as not to take away from the natural enthusiasm that people have. And that's a big deal. How do you do the separation when the person's already started? He's already moved. He's already acting. And you don't want to take away their enthusiasm, because in the end, that's exactly what we're looking for. So that becomes a whole issue about how to do this delicately and in the right way. The person who's wise, he knows beforehand that I have to think about everything. But once I actually go do, all those thoughts are no longer part of the process. And it doesn't matter if I forgot something or not. Whatever I have is now going to be blessed by Hashem, not by my prowess. That's the separate confidence in God from confidence just in myself. The Seder. So I think we'll end here for the.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Toda rabba.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You.